Hey guys, what's going on? It's your favorite abomination of science and nature. And today I want to talk about the book Frankenstein by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, the daughter of the um women's rights very early women's rights activist and I guess proto-feminist, also named Mary Wollstonecraft. And um yeah, guys, I mean, what what can I say? It's a certified disability classic. I, as a very visibly disabled man in a wheelchair, heavily relate to Frankenstein and the way he struggled to connect with people and was the object of prejudice and um just derision and essentially excommunication uh by them, and I mean, I also appreciated the books like the obviously I know it's gothic, but gothic is a subgenre of the sort of romantic novel that was common during that time, uh especially in the UK, as they went through the first industrial revolution. uh and very obviously one of the themes of the book is, as is common in a lot of romantic novels and in the context of the industrial revolution, um man and his and humanity and their technology, and um what sort of consequences can come from it, what sorts of responsibilities we have, both to the technologies that we create, especially now, um as we approach possibly the computational singularity and like general AI, general intelligence, right? We're gonna, like, for like a 200-year-old book, it's amazing how, like, of course, those that question of man versus nature and you know what we owe not only to our creations but to the rest of society. It's wild that, like, it's possibly the most relevant it has ever been. um and yeah, man, I've been honest about me personally, my own struggles with that question, because I do consider myself mostly to be a romantic, a techno romantic, in the sense that, like, because of who I am and the condition that I have to use technology. Even if, say, for example, the reliance on AI right now for a lot of stuff really threatens human creativity. But at the same time, like, guys, and I'll talk about this in a future video on how I write as a person who can't write, as a physically disabled person who can't write. Some of us can write, we're not all the same, but I've used natural language processing AI models for years now, for probably like 12 years. And it's gotten me through high school, college, and graduate school, and through a high school diploma, uh, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and a master's degree. So it's like, and obviously, my wheelchair, right? Literally could not live without it. It's not AI, but it is like a contraption of the modern age, the electrical age, and the industrial revolution. But, you know, um, I do think that new forms of discrimination against, as the internet has been saying recently, quote unquote, clankers, is gonna be a thing sooner rather than later. I'm not even joking. Like, in one of my previous videos, I said I jokingly called myself a proto clanker. And it's kind of true, TBH. To be honest, think about it. Like, think about how, future generations will look back on, um, like, for example, people who used electric wheelchairs. Because as much as I may not like it, um, I do think the transhumanist revolution is coming, guys. Like, and the reason why I don't like it is not because I don't want people to, like, live better lives with technology and stuff like that. I just think that wanting to move past humanity so quickly and, not really get at the prejudices which underlie ableism is a recipe for disaster. The last time that happened, we got eugenics, guys. And that's the historical truth. Yes, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but still, by 1941, we were seeing how that was turning out. And of course, the answer was not good. Um, but moving on to, Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster and their sort of relationship. Um, yeah, guys, I mean, what can I say? It's hard not to feel bad for Frankenstein's monster, right? Especially because, number one, Victor abandons him, right? He leaves him to fend for himself, and primarily, just for his own intellectual ambition, pretty much. Just so he could be better than his professors, essentially, at university. Um, which, once again, that's real. who, at least the more ambitious among us, or like the ones that were considered smart or gifted, can definitely relate to that. I've certainly had a big ego all the way up until grad school, like, and I still do to an extent, because, like, I'm really out here doing it as a disabled person, not gonna lie. But still, like, I've talked about that before, like, grad school kind of just shattered me. It took me off my high horse a little bit. Um, Even though, from a wheelchair, it was never really that high to begin with. But, yeah, and, Frankenstein's monster. And that's another thing, bro. He doesn't even have a name. It just, like, he's Frankenstein. I'm sorry, he's Victor's possession, literally. He doesn't have a name. They just refer to him as a thing. Again, super relatable. I was literally just that wheelchair kid. Um, for a lot of people, um, if there were multiple of us, it wasn't Gabe and Joe and Sarah or whatever our names was. It was, oh, those wheelchair kids, bro. So, like, dispassionate and indirect. And Frankenstein's monster wants what we all want, which is simply companionship. And Victor, in my estimation, unfortunately lets his prejudice of his creation, his monster, um get in the way of helping give that to to Frankenstein's monster, because, like, guys, it's not like he didn't try, right? Um like, he learned French, guys. He interacted with that one family. I'm forgetting the name right now, right? But he, like, watched as the daughter got married, as the younger kids sort of would play outside, and how their life ways would change during each season. And he would he was he would leave firewood out for them and stuff like that, and supplies when he realized that, like, they were having trouble. And, like, you know this is clearly a creature. I was gonna say a thing, but I would just be acting like Victor and Walton and all the other people. But, like, I mean, of course, man, it almost reminds me of a child, or even someone who's, and I say this with the utmost respect and context, just in the way that he doesn't really understand social situations. Someone that's autistic, right? Like, it's kind of not their fault. Um, I mean, Frankenstein's monster, guys, he was literally built different. and like, I don't mean that in the colloquial way. I mean that quite literally. Victor built him different, right? And so he has to learn the ways of the world, and they still don't like him because, as I've always also said on this channel, looks matter, guys. And just everything about him no one likes. And, you know, then Victor is like, yeah, I'll make you a companion, sure. But then, he lets his intrusive thoughts win. Oh, even in the Amazon, like, what if they go and have offspring and they create a horrible monster um together and stuff like that, and just this stuff that, like, there really wasn't any indication really that he was gonna go off and do stuff like that. um I mean, Victor even says, like, after, they meet again, before Victor goes off to Scotland and stuff, and the whole thing with Clairvaux happens where he ends up first near the Orkney Islands, and then they said just Ireland, but I guess today it would probably be Northern Ireland, right? That part was honestly um kind of based where, because when he lands, the Irish guy is like, it's not the custom of the Irish to welcome villains, which is kind of, like I said, that's kind of based because, as we know, um, free Ireland, free Palestine. uh, but yeah, um, and once again, it goes back to the fact that Victor ultimately let his prejudices win. And of course, by the end, we we know how that turns out, right? Where both Victor and his creation um end up, in a sense, passing away, right? Like, of course, one feels tremendously for the monster. Of course we do. But as he says, right, like, you know, he can't take back what he did, and his remorse will be unmatched by pretty much anyone for anything ever. Um and you know, um yeah, what can I say? I relate. And another thing is, I mean, the allusions to the fall of the creation and fall of man from the Bible are very evident. Um right, like, you have sort of, like, at least to the monster, right? An all knowing, all powerful creator who creates him, and sort of like as a tabula rasa, and then abandons him, uh and he ends up, his initial good nature ends up being corrupted by forces which he doesn't necessarily control, and which could have had the intervention of the creator, right? But that didn't end up happening. Um and he becomes corrupted. Now, one difference is that he ultimately doesn't get his Eve, does he? So, and that's something that like really it was poignant to me, that like, at least Adam, for all her faults especially, still had Eve. But you know Frankenstein's monster is all alone. I mean, Victor, also, for all his faults, he still has his family, and that is like, that's how you can tell that this book is still relatively modern, because, like, you have that sort of, once again, the traditional godly sort of ways of thinking coming up against that question of like, why did God make me a stranger? Why did my creator make me a stranger in my own house? Like, as we hear in Job. And that's why I can't tell if, you know, Frankenstein's monster is meant to be Cain or Adam or some sort of weird mixture of both. Because, like, I don't know. Like I said, he is left to roam alone, basically, but the initial conditions still read a lot like like the Genesis creation story. Um, but in either case, we see what does happen when man falls, when he allows um society to get to him in the way it does, and also when a society is built around excluding them, and making them feel that they're evil without really getting to know them, and stuff like that. And you know it's what you see play out ultimately with Victor and his creation. And you know it reminds me of, I think, James Baldwin. I'm paraphrasing him here, said that, like, or I can't remember who it was, but he was talking about the conditions of American servants. I can't, African American servants. I can't say the other word, cuz if not, this video is going to get uh not shown to a lot of people, but like, or no, I think it was racism in general. And he was like, it it's bad for both the person experiencing it and the person doing it. The person doing it loses a bit of his humanity in the process, right? Because he's doing this to another. In Frankenstein's case, or um humanoid, essentially, right? Because in all aspects other than physical, the monster is human in his emotions, in his ways of thinking. And but it also hurts the, the person receiving it, obviously, because most of the time, unfortunately, I hate to say it, and I say this, having been through a phase of this myself, and it having led me down some very dark paths, that, like, resentment does build up. Resentment does eventually lead to what um Frankenstein's monster did to his own creator. Um which, in my opinion, it serves two messages in that sense. The first one is to say, like, society should be more accepting of people with differences, right? So long as they're not hurting the rest of society or others, because it leads to that sort of thing. But the second thing is for the person experiencing it, um and that's that if you let them get to you, ultimately they win, right? Because, despite it maybe not necessarily being intentionally malignant, or, you know, like, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Evil in the same way in which, like, I don't know, something premeditated, something that you plan is. Um, that that doesn't make it okay for for it to be done. And, if you, as a person receiving that prejudice, allow yourself to be eaten alive by it, well, you've proved them right. And so, in my opinion, I'm not saying that we should fall back on the, oh, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps or complete personal responsibility angle. But, we have to fight. We have to imagine that there is a better, more caring world where what happened to Frankenstein's monster doesn't end up happening, because he is given that space to commune and to be with other creatures similar to him that care about him and stuff like that. And, um you know I and I feel like I do have the right to say that, as someone who is physically and technically neurologically very different, who has crooked eyes and crooked legs, and one of my legs is shorter than the other, and, I can't walk. I'm in a metal contraption all day. Um, and who has experience. Now, today's exclusion isn't as direct as it was back then. Today's exclusion, people will talk a lot and like really kind of like um I guess try to please you as a disabled person or neurodivergent person, right? But will their actions actually back that up? Probably not. But still, it comes from that same place of fear and prejudice and, you know, and so I think that's the important thing to take away from it as a disabled person as it relates to disability or really any difference which uh excludes you. Um and I'm so glad I read it. Like I said, it's a certified classic. It's a certified disability classic. I think you should read it. And you can find it for free cuz I downloaded it on my iPad for free, but it's like, it's in the public domain. All right, see you guys. Bye.